the first thing you can do is you can find a property and then you basically just couple it with a very good operator. And there's usually a handful of operators in every state that are well known that will partner with you. And and some of them do third party management where they'll come in and just manage for a fee. And then the other option is you could joint venture with them where it's the manage for a fee, plus they'll probably throw in some capital and invest alongside you. So that's probably step one.
Welcome to the How to Scale Commercial Real Estate Show. Whether you are an active or passive investor, we'll teach you how to scale your real estate investing business into something big.
Adam Benton started Stellar Senior Living in 2012. The company now has 4,000 units in 9 states with 2,300 employees. Adam, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me, Sam.
My goodness, 2,300 employees. That's a lot of people to keep track of. How do you do it?
Well, it's our most impressive metric. It just happens to be a people business. Obviously, you have your real estate component. You got this operational piece. And the operations, it's a people business. So there's residents, there's employees, and probably the most difficult is the resident family members. So all in, lots of people that we're trying to make happy, and but it makes for a great business.
Absolutely. Adam, there are 3 questions I ask every guest who comes on the show. In 90 seconds or less, can you tell me, where did you start? Where are you now? And how did you get there?
So this business, I started with my dad and my brother. And we did it about 10 years ago, actually 11 years ago. We just had this idea. Didn't grow up thinking I'd be in a family business. And so we started looking for properties to buy. I was working on Wall Street. So I had a lot of experience on the sales side of things. And we ended up finding 4 assets. My dad had a fair amount of experience in the space, but had never started a business on his own doing this. So we basically found these 4 assets. We ended up partnering with a public real estate investment trust who actually bought them. And then we leased it back from them. And then at that point, the whole goal is just that you got to make more money than your lease payment. And at the time we were making a little less. And so we just had to kind of grind and keep going. So that's how we started. And then the second question is where are we at today? And then how did we get there? Is that right?
Yeah, we're just, gosh, you got me confused with my own question. Where'd you start? Golly, 90 seconds or less. Where'd you start? Where are you now? And how'd you get there? Yeah, I think that's the gist of it. I feel like I said it wrong. I asked that question 7 times a week and I can't even remember the exact flow of it, but there you go.
So today we're at, like you said, we're in 9 states. We've got a few thousand employees. We've got 30 locations, and how we get there is it seems amazing, but it's basically 3 properties a year. So that's it, over 10 years, and all of a sudden you're at 30. So that's how we got there. Wow. Just adding on 3.
Yeah, adding. So that's one every 4 months you're bringing online, and I guess you're right. It's the tortoise and hare idea, and that is that you just keep plugging away at it. Tell me about the senior living opportunity. Where is the market now in this opportunity? I guess, and just give me I guess if you don't mind, just your overall perspective on the asset class and where you see it going.
So I love this asset class for a number of reasons. One is it's very people focused, very service oriented. So that component of the business is just incredible. There's so many stories every day of people caring for other people and really showing love one to another. So and it's hard to avoid. There's a lot of businesses where it's you're struggling to find a purpose as to why you're doing it. That's easy in this business.
Right.
It's also a nice nexus between real estate and operations. So senior housing is still considered, or senior living is still considered a real estate asset class. It's an alternative asset class. It's the largest piece, is about 35% of alternatives. So you've got your sort of 5 major food groups, right? It's like multifamily and office space and retail and let's see, what would be another one? Industrial and
industrial. Yeah, I guess
storage. Yeah. So then on the exactly. So on the alternative side, storage is considered alternative, student housing alternative, senior housing alternative, database centers is alternative. So we're the largest portion of that because it takes a level of operations to do it. But it's a nice mix. So you still need to know the basics, blocking and tackling related to mainly like an apartment complex. Oh, I remember the fifth one. It's hotels. It's hospitality. That's on the core asset class stuff. So,
Right.
but then there's another piece, which is just there's an operating component to it. So if you look at our income statement on one end, it looks a lot like an apartment complex, and on the other end, it looks a lot like more of like a home health and hospice or a Chili's restaurant. And you just combine those three together, and you've got our business, which is senior housing.
So yeah, I guess the question was, what is the health of the market today? I mean, there's all sorts of, theories going on. Okay, where's multifamily now? Where's self-storage? What's overbought? What's underbought? But tell me about the senior living space. What's that market snapshot look like?
So the senior living space, I think it's in a phenomenal position to invest in today. And there's a few reasons for it. To make a comparison, if you look at multifamily today, there's some difficulties. There's people are looking for high prices. There's a ton of demand. It's very obvious, and a lot of properties are totally full. Well, in our space, we got knocked on our heels a little bit during COVID, and the whole industry dropped from kind of the 90-ish% occupancy down to the mid to low 70s, and it's been climbing back every month, right? So we didn't get nearly as hit as restaurants or office space, for example, or hotels, but it did hurt us. But we've seen it growing back. Now, what we learned during COVID is that it truly is a need-driven business. So people move in for a number of reasons, maybe a lifestyle change, or they just want to make that next step. But oftentimes it's also driven by maybe you broke your hip and you're getting it, you had surgery on it, and then you realize that probably home isn't the best environment for you going forward, or that your kids are worried about you living by yourself and you want to be in more of a social structure. So those are kind of the need-driven reasons why people would move in. We thought that during COVID, March of 2020 and April of 2020, that you would just see it go to zero, and it didn't. It was incredible. Our offering, because of the restrictions put on our business, or hey, you can move your loved one in, they'll move in, they're never allowed to leave, and you're never allowed to come in and visit. And it's like, and you could talk through a window. We had to do that for almost a year, and people were still moving in. So it just really highlights the fact that there's a need, even with that kind of poor value proposition during the time, but and that it's climbing back. Now, you combine the fact that I think senior housing right now is actually still cheap because of the depressed occupancy levels, and then you look at demographic trends of where it's going, and the demand is just, the math is just easy to do, where you're just seeing baby boomers aging, people living longer, and then a higher utilization percentage of people above 75 that use assisted living that are really driving it. And then you layer on the fact that right now it's actually a little difficult to build existing buildings with cost of construction and cost of interest of debt. And you end up in an interesting scenario where you've got what I consider something that's probably on the more value in terms of what it's worth today because of the lower occupancy, but then with really good demographics going forward. And then not a lot of new supply coming on for a while because of people looking at the cost of construction and the fact that it's still depressed with occupancy. So
how does that play in with, say, a recession? So you have, I get the need side of things. I get the fact that, okay, maybe if occupancies are low, the prices overall are, like in your words, things are still cheap. But let's forecast a recession and say, okay, what, maybe that boomer, maybe that retiree, maybe their portfolio went to pot, right? It's worth half its value. How does that play into your guys' business, and does it affect it, if at all?
Yeah, so it will affect it. But for example, in the 2008, 2009 financial crisis, it was the best performing real estate asset class coming out of it, right in the middle of it as well. And then to highlight back to what we saw during COVID, which is just that the reasons why people are using senior housing don't necessarily correlate with the market as a whole. It's more need driven, related to your health. And then the main ways in which our residents pay for moving into senior housing, they have three sort of buckets that they pull from. So one is obviously just your general Social Security. So you're getting 1,000 or 2,000 a month from that. The second is maybe savings through pensions. And then the last one is equity from your home. And so those will come down a little bit. But if you look at what's happened even over the last run of 10 or 15 years, those second buckets, your pension savings, those amounts, and then the value of your home have gone up tremendously. So we're not seeing a huge slowdown from people's ability to pay for senior housing when they need it. And I don't think that'll slow very much during a recession.
Right. What are you guys building ground up? Are you buying existing facilities? What's your strategy?
We do both. Yeah. So we have 3 ground up constructions that we're doing today. A typical ground up will be 150 units. And they generally range at that size of about $40 to $50 million to build, something like that. And then in terms of existing, oftentimes these properties need to compete. And so to do that, you need to have a really good set of amenities and common space. And we'll take existing properties, renovate them, make them look nicer, and then put in the correct operations and get it going. So we do both options, buy existing and build.
What when you look at an asset, and I'm going to call it distressed, right? I'm going to take this all the way back to maybe my single family days of flipping houses.
Yeah.
You could spot one a mile away, like, oh, hey, there's a house we can make a pile of money on. Because you see the common signs. Like, what are the common signs you're finding in assets that you're acquiring and then renovating? You're like, oh, hey, there's something that we can turn around.
Yeah, it's a little different than what you might find in a home or multifamily, in the fact that you might find a multifamily that, hey, it's just a little tired. There's deferred maintenance and the prices are a little bit too high. If we just go through and carpet, paint, and lighting, and maybe some changes that we can then compete and have it fill back up and charge higher rate. Within the senior housing space, if you think about how you choose a hospital, for example, it's less about what the building looks like and more about the reputation and their operational ability to care for you. Right. So when you take those two concepts, senior housing sort of sits in the middle, where there's a component where you want it to look good and nice, but at the same time, you have to have a solid reputation. And there's a saying in our industry, which is that chandeliers don't give care, people do. And so you see that. Now, when people first look to move in, they want to make sure the building looks nice, and you just kind of hit those table stake options, that it smells good. You got somebody that's greeting at the front desk, things like that. But then ongoing, what they really want is that someone's going to do 2 things. They're going to properly care for your loved one, and they're going to love them, right? So those are those 2 sort of aspects that you need. So when we look at a property that's maybe distressed, you'd be surprised that sometimes they're distressed because they've had deferred maintenance and they're older, and there's an opportunity just to do like a CapEx improvement plan. Right. But we see a lot of new buildings that are also distressed, and it's because they missed on that reputational or operational component to it. And those are ones that we love, because it just is a matter of just finding the right team, training them properly, incentivizing them, and just having everybody pull in the same direction. And that doesn't actually take a lot of CapEx, but you can't go buy it at Home Depot either. So you gotta build it. Yeah. I
mean, that sounds more like a company culture issue than it does like you're saying, a CapEx item.
Right. Yeah. You can't go to, aisle 13 in Walmart and buy company culture. It's one of those secret sauce items that you have to just constantly work on. And especially when you have a couple thousand employees, that is truly something that we focus a lot on. In fact, this is something we pulled from Netflix. We have what's called the culture deck, which is about a 70-page PowerPoint slide that goes through all of our culture items that we talk about.
I mean, from a couple, from 2 sons and dad saying, all right, hey, let's go buy some senior living facilities. That's cool. To now having a 70-page culture deck, like that's a lot of progress, first of all. But how did you decide, and how did you finally figure out, especially from the early days, what that culture was going to look like, how you wanted that to actually play out? I mean, that to me sounds a lot like work. Okay.
Yeah.
This is going to
Sounds pretty daunting, right?
That's exactly it. That's a great word for it.
So if you were, so for your listeners on the podcast, what I'd recommend if you want to get some exposure to senior housing, what you want to do is partner with a management company, like an operator that will be able to do it for you. I wouldn't just jump in and start saying, great, I'm going to this is easy. I'm just going to start buying and operating senior housing, unless you got a lot of time. So the first thing you can do is you can find a property, and then you basically just couple it with a very good operator. And there's usually a handful of operators in every state that are well known that will partner with you. And and some of them do third party management, where they'll come in and just manage for a fee. And then the other option is you could joint venture with them, where it's the manage for a fee, plus they'll probably throw in some capital and invest alongside you. So that's probably step one. If you don't want to go build like a 60-page culture deck and manage a whole set of employees and payroll and everything that goes with it. And then you can learn a lot by doing that. And if you feel like it's worth it, then you could over time just like morph into launching your own management company.
Who is the hardest employee for you guys to bring on and kind of fit into your system? Like, what's the greatest need that you say inside of your business? Like, man, this is somebody that makes or breaks us, and it's probably the hardest seat to fill.
Yeah, we're a 24-hour business. So the hardest seat to fill would probably be a weekend, night shift, med tech, or caregiver, right? So imagine it, right? Your 2 a.m. Sunday morning caregiver. That's probably your hardest position to fill. And they're the most important because they're right front lines on what's happening. If you think about a standard building of ours, we've got an executive director, you have a chef and their whole team. So that's sous chef, servers, cooks, dishwasher. You have like a nurse with their whole team. So that's RN, LPNs, med techs, CNAs, right? So, and then you have activities, right? Which is activities, transportation. And you might have a front desk, and then you have a sales team, maintenance, and then you have basically an executive director that runs that whole thing. And I'm sure I'm missing a section, but that's the basic structure of a senior housing team.
Wow. Yeah. And how do you guys solve that? Like, what do you do to attract that 2 a.m.? You call them med tech? Was that the right word?
Yeah, like a med tech, somebody who's managing medications or a certified nursing assistant. That is a real trick, especially today where we're having a lot of payroll issues related to attracting, retaining, maintaining talented employees. And there's not a silver bullet, but it's the same thing. People want to work in a place where they have a friend, where they feel like they're making a contribution or making a difference every day, and where they have opportunity to grow and hit their own goals. And so you have to be, just like you're trying to keep a building occupied by attracting residents. On the same side, we have a similar process for attracting and retaining talented employees.
Is there a location or I guess like, where does this business work? Is it anywhere? What do you guys look for in expansion? You say, okay, here's kind of the right market conditions for us to move into that area. What's that look like for you?
It's a great question. The knee-jerk reaction is to say, I know it's Arizona and Florida, right? That's where we're at. But this is actually, it's just draw 5-mile radiuses around the entire country with population. So your top 100 MSAs, and then you just this is more of like a product where you offer to a neighborhood. For example, our average age resident is 86 years old.
Wow.
And at that point, when we look at the demographics of where to build a property, sometimes we look at what the population is of where their kids are. Because at that age, let's say mom lives in Texas and she has a fall and her kids all live out of state, right? They're probably not going to actually find a place in Texas to have their mom live. They'll have mom live near one of the kids.
Right.
And so they tend to move to places like Columbus, Ohio, or Salt Lake City. It doesn't actually match up with what you're thought of as where elderly live. They might live there before, but then when they have more needs, they'll move in close to their kids. And we're talking a 5 to 6 mile radius, 12-minute drive time. that's what we're talking.
That's interesting. I'm thinking about a small town here in Tennessee that I know pretty well, and they put in, I don't know how big the facility was, but for that small town, it was a pretty astounding facility. I'm like, really? Here? And the place it's jam-packed. Jam-packed. And I mean, this town doesn't have more than 15, maybe 20,000 tops people in it. And I just kind of looked at that. I was, it's a head scratcher for me going, I would not have put a assisted living facility or a senior living facility in this town. And yet here I am wrong again, which is not uncommon, but here I am wrong again. So I was really curious what you guys see, where you guys find opportunities. So that's really cool that, think through like wherever the kids are going to be in a 5-mile radius, with any large MSA. There you go. That's a pretty easy dart to board. So that's really cool.
It is, and we find that, and we've seen that strategy as well. Obviously, it makes sense if you're in the middle of Salt Lake City and you've got 1 million people to draw from. But we've seen it in places. We have a property in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. Coeur d'Alene is not very big, but we find that the draw actually comes not just from Coeur d'Alene, but there's a massive sort of 50-mile radius of rural population where people are coming in from, and that at some point the similar trek that you would do to come to a hospital or to something where you need additional care, you'll do the same thing to come into the closest city for senior housing needs.
Right. Yeah. I guess that would make sense for the town I'm thinking of too, because there's nothing really within an hour and a half of there. That would be any substantial size, but there's dozens of towns that are anywhere from 5 to 15,000 people, that surround it within 30 to 45 minutes. So
that's the big town. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So that's very, very fascinating. Adam, I've loved this. Thanks for taking the time to come on the show today and break down the senior living space for us, how you guys got involved in it, the ways that you guys have grown and built your company, things to look out for. And then, I mean, this has been absolutely awesome. Just learning about your business, the people business. I can't believe that 2,300 employees. That's a lot of balls to keep in the air and things to keep moving. If our listeners want to get in touch with you and learn more about you, what is the best way to do that?
Yeah, you can look me in at LinkedIn. So our business is Stellar Senior Living, and Adam Benton at Stellar Senior Living. And just message me. I'm happy to reach out, talk with you directly if you have any questions about the business. And I always love taking time to explain our industry a little better.
Awesome. Thanks again, Adam. Have a great rest of your day.
Yeah, you bet. Thanks, Sam.